If you think about it, dolls are kind of weird. They are replicas of people that you pretend to take care of. But if you look at it that way, action figures are weird too. I'm not the kind of person that gets creeped out by toys, but one doll in particular sends shivers down my spine. When I was young, my older sister had returned home. She was about 13 years older than me, and when she returned, she had two kids, my niece and nephew. They were 3 and 2, and they each had toys that they loved to carry around with them everywhere. For my niece, that was a Ring Around the Rosie doll. You see, in the 90s there was a doll that sang the Ring Around the Rosie song. The song is creepy in and of itself, being that it's about a plague. My niece's love for her doll would soon change. It hadn't been too long before weird things started to happen. The doll was supposed to sing the song whenever you held a censer that was on each hand. But this doll started to go off when no one was around it. It first started to sing while we were all away at school. My mom would be there home alone, and she could hear the doll singing from the bedrooms. Then my brothers and sisters started to hear it too. My brother was home sick with my mom, and they both heard it singing from my sister's room. When my brother went to investigate, he found the doll was under the bed, away from anything. My sister was asleep one night when she was awoken by the doll singing, "Ring around the rosie's pockets." My sister poked her head from under the covers and looked to where the doll was sitting on the end of her bed. The song stopped mid-sentence. Then, when she covered back up, the singing picked up right where it left off. "Full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down." My sister was so freaked out, she went to my mom's room to sleep. Off and on, the doll would wake my sister up singing the song through the night. Everyone in the house started to hear the doll at all times of the day and night. I heard it sing twice myself. Once when we were returning home from school, as we walked into the house and talking and yammering about our school day, the distant sound of it singing from my sister's room. "Ashes, ashes, we all fall down." I went to the source of the sound, only to find the doll laying in the middle of the floor. I tried my best to explain how the doll could be playing by itself, but the doll was only supposed to play when both of its hands were being held at the same time. The second time I heard it was after my sister had gone into my parents' room. The thing was still playing in her room. I heard it from my bed, but there was no way I was brave enough to go see what it was this time. We all finally had enough. My niece no longer liked the doll, and like the rest of us, she was creeped out by it. My older sister took the doll and locked it in her car. Just a few days later, it appeared in the house again. I don't know if someone was playing a prank or what, but once the singing started up again, we resolved to get rid of the doll. My sister took the doll to the dumps and left it there. The doll was creepy for many reasons. the song it playing by itself, and how it just showed up back in the house after being locked in my sister's car. Now, the house we lived in had a few other creepy occurrences happen, so it might have been the doll or maybe a playful ghost in the house. But I never want to be around one of those dolls again, not as long as I live.
About a year ago, I was in Goodwill with my mom, just looking at random things. I was bored and decided to dig through the stuffed animal bin. I found this stuffed rabbit toy in there that looked like it was handmade in the 30s. She was very bland looking and was dressed in a beige and dark blue dress with an apron on. Not anything special, but I thought she looked cute and a little creepy, so I decided to take her home. In the car, we were thinking up names and decided to call her Bonnie, because it sounded like Bunny and it seemed like an old-timey name. As soon as I got home with Bonnie, I started to get a bad feeling. I was very uncomfortable with no explanation for it. I took her and put her in my room. For some reason, I felt she needed to be displayed carefully in a nice location instead of just thrown on the bed like any other stuffed animal. So I set her on my dresser facing the door. Not much happened in the first few days, but after a week, I started to feel very uneasy with her being in the room. No matter how I positioned her or moved her throughout the day, her face always seemed to be turned toward my bed. She was made of cloth, so her head shouldn't have been able to move separately from the rest of her body. Yet it seemed like it did. I thought it must just be my imagination. There were also odd noises in my bedroom and in the bathroom beside my bedroom, but I just assumed it was coming from an appliance and was unrelated. But whenever I tried to get someone else to hear them, they'd stop. A few days later, my nephew came over for a visit, and something new started to happen with Bonnie, which he quickly pointed out to me. For some reason, there were a lot of flies gathering around the area that would have been her mouth. I picked her up and sniffed her and didn't smell anything strange, and I hadn't got anything on her. I ran her through the wash anyways, just to make sure, but the flies didn't stop gathering on her mouth, even after the wash. The next day, another small, odd occurrence happened. I don't know if it's related to Bonnie, but none of this was happening before she came into the house. I was in my bedroom listening to music, and I heard a loud crash in the living room. I came out to check what had happened, and my mom was just looking at something on the floor. I asked her what was wrong, and she pointed to a little bird figurine that she usually kept on a high shelf. It was on the floor now. She told me it had just been flown off the shelf really hard, like someone had threw it down. Later that day, I was out in the living room and I heard something fall in my bedroom. I went to see what had happened, and my lanyard and a bottle of medicine had fallen off my bookshelf and landed in front of it. The only problem with this is that there were several other things in front of the lanyard and the medicine, and for them to have fallen the way they did, they should have knocked those things off as well. But they didn't. Everything was in front of them was perfectly still, not moved an inch. A few nights later, I woke up in the middle of the night in a completely dark room. I opened my laptop to see what time it was, and the clock read 2:57 a.m. It was a silly thing, but I decided I wouldn't go back to sleep until sometime after 3 a.m., because according to legend, that's when demons come out, or something like that. I sat up and waited, scrolling through my phone for a few minutes, when I saw that it was 3 a.m. I didn't know why, but I looked at the floor for a moment. What I was certain was only a few seconds, but when I looked up, I saw the clock change from 3:03 to 3:04. I never even see it be 3:01. I had somehow lost 4 minutes in just a few seconds. I figured I must somehow be confused and just decided to try and go back to sleep. I laid down and covered up. It was the middle of winter, so I had 3 covers over me and a heater on beside the bed. But even with all that, my right side felt like it was freezing. I checked several times to see if there was a gap in the covers, somewhere that lets the cold air in, but I found nothing. I rolled over onto that side and went to sleep. The next morning, it only got weirder. I went to tell my mom about the weird events, and for some reason I decided to take Bonnie with me, just to get her out of my room, because somehow felt that she could cause this. I took a picture of her with my camera to send to some friends who I was telling the story to, but when I plugged my SD card into my laptop, the file was completely gone. I came back to my mom's room and asked her if I could use her phone to take a picture of Bonnie. I did, and saved the photo to the gallery. I closed the gallery for a moment to do something else, and when I opened it again, the photo of Bonnie was gone. Nowhere to be seen. At some point, while we were joking around that morning, we'd also started taking a video. The video showed several minutes of my mom on her bed and us talking. Then the topic shifted to Bonnie. When it does, I panned the camera over to my mom's dresser where I'd put her earlier. When reviewing the video later, the camera had, for some reason, stopped filming the moment before Bonnie was on screen. Losing 2 pictures and a video, this thing was unsettling to say the least. I got sick of it, and I didn't want things to escalate anymore, so I gave Bonnie away to someone else. Things have been pretty normal ever since then.
Anyone that knows me can tell you that I believe in ghosts. Throughout the years, I've lived in a number of houses, some of which I truly believe were haunted. And I've done a lot of research and read a good number of books on the subject as well. So it wouldn't come to any surprise to find out that I do a little ghost hunting every once in a while. It isn't anything too fancy, mostly me hanging out in the local haunted place for a few hours talking to myself. I don't ever really catch anything of much interest, but I think both the scariest and best evidence I ever got was while exploring this old cemetery. There was a legend about the graveyard. If you drove around it 3 times, then parked in the middle and flashed your lights 3 times, you would then start seeing and hearing the spirits of the dead. Of course, I wanted to try this, so I drove out there with my brother. The place was way out of the way. We had to navigate a lonely, dark country roads to get there. We'd stopped seeing houses and only started seeing trees. When we got there, it was clear the place didn't get the attention that it needed. The brick entryway was cracked and in bad need of repair. There was no gate, only a couple of rusted posts where one used to stand. It was a small plot with no more than 50 graves, and areas of the grass had grown high from being neglected. We pulled into the little dirt road and made a circle around the graves. It wasn't totally dark yet, so we got out and took a look around. There was a mix of old and new graves. We unloaded the flashlights and recorder and other ghost hunting stuff we had brought with us. Some of the plots had been well kept by their loved ones, with little angel statues and photos and tiny American flags. Once it got dark, we started the ritual. We loaded back up in my car and drove around slowly 3 times. I had to carefully pull in between 2 large oak trees into the middle. I flashed my lights, 1, 2, 3. And then we shut off the engine and got out, ready for whatever would happen. We waited, and then nothing happened. We didn't see or hear anything that would raise alarms. We stood there in the dark, surrounded by the trees on all sides. After a while, we decided to do some exploring. Other than looking at the old graves, some of which were over 100 years old, we tried to provoke something. We called out to the spirits to see if anything would react. When we were off, looking at a far corner of the graveyard, where there were a few plots off by themselves, as we were there, we heard the sound from the other side of the cemetery. It was a tink, like 2 pieces of metal being clanged together. My brother and I immediately stopped what we were doing and headed in the direction of the sound. We looked all over the area to find what could have made it. We finally found a tombstone that had a variety of porcelain figures on it. Some of them had been knocked over, and some were broken. We picked them up and tried to recreate the sound we heard. Nothing made the right sound. It all made more of a thud when we dropped them. A very different sound. We couldn't recreate it, so we moved on and finished our investigation. Now, we had a digital recorder with us that recorded everything that happened. Once we got home, it was too late to listen to it, and we just went off to bed. The next day, I was listening to the recording, trying to find anything that was odd. When I finished listening, I didn't seem to find anything. So I let other people listen to it. A second pair of ears doesn't hurt, after all. After they had finished listening to it, they brought it back to me immediately and told me I needed to listen to it again. So I did. This time I made sure to listen very carefully. I put on my headphones and found a quiet place. It was crazy. How could I have missed it? It was clear as day, right in the middle of my brother and I's conversation. By the graveside, you could hear a third voice speaking in a soft, lazy male voice. I heard it say, broken? I couldn't believe it. The voice was there, and it seemed to respond to the figure that was been broken on the bottom. I went back and tried it again. I couldn't get a response. So, was it a real life ghost I picked up? Was someone from beyond concerned about the broken figure? It was the best piece of evidence I've ever gotten. The old graveyard still freaks me out a little. To whatever voice was on there, I'm sorry that your figure got broken, and I hope whoever put it there brought you a new one.